Hello my friends and welcome back. It's hump day, so happy hump day to you. We'll begin with a very funny bit of news coming from North Korean soldiers fighting in the Russian army. And I would not guess that this is the first major problem they encounter. It is not the Ukrainian drones or artillery fire or their Ukrainian superior training. It is their first connection with the internet, the World Wide Web, the free internet. And I mean, all of these North Korean soldiers being men, you know what they do there? Yeah, of course, they're gonna watch porn. Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, I know 90% of my audience is male. I ask you this question. You have never connected to the internet in your life, not even once. Everything is forbidden in your country. Now suddenly, you're in the free land, you have your phone, for the first time you can have a phone, you find internet. I mean, what's the first thing you do there? Of course, there are reports that North Korean soldiers are already struggling with porn addiction. I'm not going to comment on it, but I find it funny. And it makes sense, honestly. The guys have been stuck in there for their whole lives, and now they're free. They want to use that freedom. And in this video, we can actually see and hear the North Korean troops trying to learn some Russian words, and I might be mistaken, but let's see what they learn. They're being taught piderast, which means, I cannot say the word in English here, but it's the F word, but the other F word, the bad F word that you still cannot say anywhere. And the Ukrainians and Russians call each other on the front lines this piderasts. The Russians say that to the Ukrainians say that to the Russians. So this is of course the first word the Russian soldiers teach to the North Korean troops, who are very meticulously trying to pronounce it. It's funny that this is their mandatory vocabulary they're being taught. And of course we have multicam here, we have two cameras. This is another angle of this very same gathering. There's plenty of footage going around about the North Korean troops. In anything they do, for looking at afar, they resemble just regular men, regular troops who are trying to learn new vocabulary and trying to survive. And now, apparently, coping with their porn addiction. Now, continuing with the North Korean topic, Putin met with the head of the North Korea's foreign ministry in the Kremlin. Participants of the Axis of Evil shook hands for a very long time. And you can see it in the video. They are not shaking on it. They are just holding hands, looking each other in the eyes and speaking words to each other. Well, this is the beginning of the cooperation, military cooperation between two dictatorships, North Korea and Russia, and this will have implications in the next decade for Europe and for the rest of the world. There have been reports that North Korea receives space technologies, money as soldier salaries, and food from Russia in exchange for sending their troops to fight on Russia's side. Experts also say that this way North Korea aims to secure Russia fighting on its side in case it goes to war. So yeah, it is not now North Korea helping Russia, but it's also Russia helping North Korea in the future. So this is North Korea's guarantee against South Korea. I mean, other than China, they now have Russia also on their side. My friends, I want to introduce you to ground news. It's very important in watching the sources which cover the Russo-Ukrainian war to know their background. Are they high factuality? Are they leaning left or right? Who are they owned by? This is why ground news is such a great of a tool. North Korea says it backs Russia to victory in Ukraine. This is the title we're looking at, and you can see the coverage details on the right here. Total news sources 108, meaning it's a very popular topic to cover. Leaning left 15, leaning right 19, and center 23. Bias distribution is 40% center, and the bias distribution chart you can see right below here, left being indicated by blue color, right being indicated by a red color, center white. One of the most important things about any coverage of any news site is the factuality. 56% high factuality, and anything below high I wouldn't even look at. Also, we have here the ownership chart, which gives us an idea of what might be the agenda behind the wording of the title or behind pushing some kind of a narrative. Now, every owner has an agenda they want to push. Now that you can know about who owns the media house, you can perhaps know what they're pushing. Here we can see the articles, and one by one you can see the titles and headlines, and the wording in the headline gives us a lot of hints of if they're pushing left or right, or if they're just in the center. Ground News has a For You tab, and I can click here and find out only what I want to read about, which in my case is Ukrainian war and Ukraine. Two topics. Ground News is giving my viewers 50% off their Vantage plan during the election season. This is the best deal of the year, and it will only be available for a limited time. So make sure to use my link in the description below. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. Now, my friends, we'll jump to Ukraine, and Rasputitsa is well underway, meaning everything is wet and muddy, but soon it will turn to frost. First snows came down in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, and I mean, snow is beautiful, winter is coming, we're waiting for Christmas, but also cold is coming. And if your country is being bombarded daily by Russian Shahed drones, I mean, there are power outages in Ukraine daily in the cities, and if there are power outages and it's like minus 20 outside Celsius, people begin to get frostbite. Today, there is wet snow with rain in many Ukrainian regions. The temperature at night gets below 0 Celsius. It is already snowing in Kharkiv. The heating is not on in several cities. Ukraine is getting ready to face the hardest winter in our history. There may be no electricity in Ukraine for 20 hours a day in winter if Russia strikes our critical energy system and the weather is cold. As of today, blackouts are most probable for 8 to 14 hours a day. We're expecting a very harsh winter. I don't know if the people in their apartments will be able to survive the prolonged heating and power cuts in severe cold weather. Russia is doing everything to make Ukrainians flee their country. Now, I was in Ukraine for my honeymoon with my wife in July, the hottest month in Ukraine, and I was there for 2 weeks, and every day it was above 30 degrees Celsius. Mostly it was 33, 34, sometimes 35 Celsius, and sun. And the issue was the opposite, actually. There were power outages about 8 to 10 hours a day in the cities we went to. That means the cooling system didn't work, so it was really difficult to sleep. And now it's the opposite issue, that the heating system doesn't work. Unfortunately, the side effect of this might be hundreds of thousands of refugees from Ukraine to Europe, which is an additional burden to Europe. Russia is using this attacking Ukrainian heating infrastructure as an immigration weapon, because it forces Ukrainian civilians to flee to Europe again. Europe, prepare for a gigantic waves of refugees. Creating a massive swarm of refugees is Russia's plan. It is being done for the purpose of bringing the power to Kremlin-aligned anti-immigrant parties in Western Europe. Target 1, Germany. Yes, because if hundreds of thousands or close to 1 million additional Ukrainian refugees go to European countries, this will cause the peoples of these countries to elect anti-immigration policies and politicians, because that's how things usually go. And these politicians sometimes tend to be Kremlin-minded, which means Putin can use this attacking of the heating infrastructure to cause the immigration weapon, to cause anti-immigration politicians being elected in the European Union who sometimes match Kremlin's talking points. You can see where I'm going with this. Now, my friends, we'll take quite in-depth look into the Russian economy. We'll look at Russian losses. Can they sustain it? We'll look at their budget. We'll look at their railways, because all of these three categories, they give us an idea. They give us a glimpse of how Russia really is doing. People like to bash on sanctions. Oh, they're slow, they're boring, they don't do nothing. They're being circumvented by Italy's exports to Kyrgyzstan or Germany's exports to Kyrgyzstan. Now, my friends, I'm here to tell you that sanctions work. They are a slow and patient but deadly weapon. Let's look all of these three categories I just mentioned. Western media, political commentary are dominated by doomers, predicting short and long-term outcomes on their inexhaustibility of Russia's personnel and equipment pools, despite overwhelming evidence that Russia is struggling badly. And yes, I know the comments, I've seen them. Oh, Artur, you're living in a cloud castle. Russia is obviously advancing on the fronts. Yes, my friends, they are. Russians are advancing with the fastest pace in the last 1 to 2 years on the fronts. But I don't look, and any military strategist and analyst should not look at victory of the war with front lines changing. Any war is a war of attrition, any war is a war of economies. And Russian economy is taking a massive beating, but they are advancing on the front. Let's continue. The following are the things I've been tracking for some time. Number 1, the Russians are losing an infantry division every week to 10 days in terms of soldiers at a rate between 1,100 to 1,700 and associated equipment. Number 2, the Russian artillery is getting shorter ranged over time from losing the ability to make barrels and liners for the 152mm guns. We are seeing literal World War II 122mm artillery pieces, presumably from North Korean stocks in Donbass. Number 3, half of Russian artillery shells in 2024 are from the North Korea. Armed Forces of Ukraine reports Russian artillery force is only outshooting them 2-1 in total shell count, while military intelligence says that North Korea only has another 3 months of artillery ammo left to send Russia at current rates. Number 4, training duration of replacement troops is getting shorter by the month. This means Russian replacements are less able to survive in combat. The average Mobic now gets 7 to 10 days of training, and most die in the first month. Number 5, the Russians are repurposing troops from other arms as infantry, despite loss of capabilities like maintainers for nuclear rocket forces or naval sea power or tactical air power. And to conclude, all of the above means that Russia has burned out its pre-war trainers and it's darn near through its ex-Soviet reserves of war gear. The Russian economy is the size of Italy's in the term of GDP, and most of the easily spent economic surplus is from oil and gas. All of these points I just read to you are nails in the coffin, and there will be that one final nail at some point in the future. Everything pointing in the Russian economy is pointing at a catastrophe, pointing at a stagnation, pointing at that at some point they will have to pay the price for these sanctions, and it's very heavy. Now, my friends, we'll take a look at a leaked tape. This is a leaked telephone call from the head of the Russian railways. And it paints us a picture of what is really going on in the Russian railway system. And bear in mind, Russia, as such a vast country, is incredibly dependent on their railways, so their railway system and how much they carry the freight carts in the railway system gives you a real outlook of how the economy is doing. According to the channel, in this recording, Belazerov instructs Sergei Krokhin, the deputy head of the Central Directorate of Traffic Management, for operational work to reduce the working fleet of cars to 1.1 million, while even less was proposed. He issues an order to reduce the number of empty cars on the network by 100,000 and decide with the operators how many of those cars will be sent to storage or will not be picked up after unloading from customers on each route. There is simply nothing left to carry in them. The volume of transportation is constantly decreasing. The channel comments that Russian Railways has been experiencing increasing problems since the start of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Many of its employees, who are generally low-paid, have signed up for better-paid military positions or other war-related jobs. So this is how this war is biting Russia. Of course, Putin offering massive payments for anybody who wants to work in the military sector. for a moment pumps up the economy, but in the long term, railways are not maintained. There's nothing to transport in the railway cars. This info comes from the head of the Russian railways. This is as much from the source as possible, and he says there is simply not enough goods to transport on the cars. And if any of you are economists, if there's not any goods to transport, what will happen to the country? Now, my friends, let's take a look at how much Russia is paying for the soldiers to join, to sign up the contract for the Ministry of Defense, basically to join the storm units to go to fight in Ukraine. The red line here is the average payment in time, and we can see 2022, 2023, 2024, and as you can see, the acute shortage of manpower begins to show itself at the beginning of 2024, and then Putin has signed, after every 3 months almost, I remember covering it, a many times increase in payments, one-time payments for signing up for the Ministry of Defense. As you can see, it goes up many folds, taking away billions, if not tens of billions, from Russian war chests. It will run out in 1 to 2 years. Also, it lures people from other jobs which are very important for Russian economy and the entire state. For example, railway workers. They are needed. They are one of the most important workers in Russia because the entire Russian transportation system heavily relies on railways. Now these guys are being paid many times more in the military. Of course, they want to sign up, but that means their transportation system will take the hit. Now, let's look at a very simplified chart of the Russian budget. Total budget, 41 trillion rubles, and we can see that a third of it has been allocated to the military. About 30% almost of entire money that Russia generates in a year is now allocated to the military spending. This is massive. Soviet Union spent about 40% to the military spending, and in the end, they didn't have enough left over. The 80s was a massive stagnation time. My parents lived at that time, and there was nothing in the stores anywhere almost. And this is where Russia is headed right now. Now this takes time. When the Afghanistan war began, it still took over a decade for the Soviet Union to stagnate and finally collapse. It takes years, but the sanctions are working. Now, my friends, I want to bring to you Sergei Lavrov, and I want to watch a very, he says in his speech, you can see it in the video, that, I quote, "The dollar as a world's reserve currency has signed a verdict." According to Lavrov's, the dollar's collapse will be brought about by the policy of sanctions that the West is applying, including against Russia. The dollar, which for decades was advertised to us explicitly as the common property of all mankind, has been turned into a weapon of suppression and punishment of geopolitical competitors and simply the disobedient. And the dollar was condemned as the world's reserve currency and means of international settlements, Lavrov said. Now, Russians, Putin, they are trying with BRICS, they are trying to change the world's reserve currency from the dollar to something else. Is it really possible? Well, the simple answer is just no. But it's more complicated than that. Last year, Lavrov predicted an irreversible de-dollarization. The year before, he said the dollar was shrinking, and in 2019, he claimed that the United States would soon collapse because of its sanctions policy. Now let's see the truth, plain, hard-cold statistics. According to the statistics from the SWIFT international payment system, the dollar's share in global trade in 2024, this year, reached a 12-year high. In August, 49.07% of all transactions in the world took place in the dollar. 12-year high. Sanctions to Russia, the new axis of evil is forming. BRICS is trying to de-dollarize the world, and still we have dollar reaching the 12-year high in all transactions in the world, with 49% of the entire money moved across the globe being done in dollar. So the short answer to Lavrov is no, the dollar is not going to collapse, and no, it will not be replaced by anything else. Plain and simple answer to you. Continuing with the Ruble $2 course, I don't really cover this course because the ruble fluctuates up and down all the time, but in recent 3 months, it has plummeted. And it plummeted, of course, in the first months of the war, then it climbed up really high, and now it plummets again. It goes up and down. But in the next few months, we might see the ruble being worth $1 being worth 100 rubles or more. This is one of the lowest ruble has ever been. And talking about the devaluation of the ruble, Russians are seeing and feeling it also. Small coins are not in significant demand among Russians, said Anatoly Aksakov, chairman of the State Duma Committee on Financial Markets. In his opinion, it is necessary to consider how expedient it is to produce such coins. For example, 1 ruble coin, it's the same as 1 cent in the United States right now. It's a penny. 1 ruble is a penny in the US, pretty much the same value. The deputy recalled that according to the law, the ruble is the national currency and accordingly, the ruble must remain in circulation. He believes that life will show how expedient it is to produce something that is of no interest to the people. It is obvious that there will be no devaluation, no reforms, no changes, because the national currency is stable. Are you sure about that? The national currency is not stable. This is what we have seen in the last 2 years. Actually, ever since 2014, when the sanctions hit Russia, rubles has been going haywire. It has been going crazy. But now it plummets to all-time low, meaning Russians are just losing the money that they have. It's burning in their hands. We touched upon North Korea, we touched upon the Russian economy. Let's finally dive into the explosions. I know you guys want to see and hear about some explosions. First of all, we go to Makhachkala airport and port, where 2 drones flew and exploded, delivered gifts to the Russians, or Dagestani actually, they're not the Russians. You can see this is the first arrival. Looks like a plane, right? Well, because it is. It is a plane, small civilian plane, which has been refurbished into a massive explosive drone. We have seen Ukrainians do it before. And it's just flying. It's unmanned, of course. It's not a manned kamikaze aircraft. And we also have a video of one of them actually connecting to the targets. In this one, you can hear a lot of small arms fire being shot at the plane. I think they destroy it in midair. No, they don't. The plane destroys itself. No. I'm sorry, I take it back. The Russians destroy the plane or the drone with their seaport. Look at that. Bada bing, bada boom. Some freedom was exported to Russia. Today, my friends, United States held the election. I don't comment on the election. I've chosen not to do it, but I can comment on what European Union should and must do. And it is this opinion of mine and the reality is not connected to the United States elections. It's simply connected to the European Union and its security and its big neighbor Russia. Take the United States out of the equation, it is still the same answer. European leaders are starting to respond to the United States election, and what I think they should do and must do with or without the US is increase domestic defense spending. Heavy European cooperation without United States support or with, it doesn't really matter. We can and will defend ourselves on our own. Focus strategy on deterring Russia. United. We must be united. One by one, any European state would lose to Russia, but united, we will win 100%. The United Kingdom immediately needs to increase defense spending rapidly rather than shrinking its army. Focus its military strategy on deterring Russian aggression in Europe rather than confronting global threats. Work with European allies to defend Europe under a NATO that doesn't have United States support. Well, I do believe NATO will have United States support, whoever will be the next president, whoever is the next president. But Europe needs to pick up the pace. In 1939, with an aggressor nation on the march and no United States military assistance, the United States had a smaller army than Belgium at the time. United Kingdom defense spending increased from 3.75% to 9% of the GDP. Do we have the will to do it again? You must find the will. Poland is doing it. Estonian military spending percentage-wise is one of the highest in all of NATO. Estonia and Poland actually are number 1 and number 2. And I do hope other NATO members in Europe will follow suit. Because that is the only way to go. That is the only way to survive. In the last video, we touched upon the subject of Russia having to import butter from the United Arab Emirates, a desert country, an oil country. And I mean, how do you make butter in the desert? Do you even have cows? It's a stupid question, I know, but do they make it from camels? Well, now we have the answer. Yes, the Russians are importing butter from UAE because they're facing massive shortages of butter in the country. But where does the UAE butter come from? That's the million-dollar question. I don't know what kind of butter they're talking about. That like the UAE will help with the butter. If we buy butter, it's made in Ukraine. Here, and you can see it in the label also here. Ukraine. I don't know, there's German butter here. Ukrainian butter. You can't talk about your own butter. So they import from UAE, and it's funny because Russia is like a big agricultural country and they still have to import butter from a desert nation in the Middle East. And the butter is imported to the desert nation from Ukraine. So Russia is right now buying Ukrainian butter. What? That is strange. There was a day of the national unity of Russia, and for that these cars gathered, and they all have missiles on top of them. And the missiles say "Na Washington," which means to Washington. All of these missiles, and they have Russian flags, and they have Russian Georgi's flags, old Volga car right here, new Ladas, everything. Well, if you're living in United States, how do you feel that the Russians are gathering with nuclear missiles that have text to Washington? It's actually a question I would love to read the comments of you, United States citizen, if you are one, just to tell me, how do you feel about this? This is a video of Russians having missiles with to Washington labels on them. Do you have missiles to Moscow written on them? I'm going to love the comments today. Now, I want to report about a certain Russian war crime that I haven't reported. It has been going on for quite some time now. There are plenty of videos about it, which I cannot show in any way, even with filters. But I will read the war crime to you, so I have reported about it, and I think you must know about it. Russians play human safari in Kherson by hunting civilians with drones. There are increasing reports about deliberate Russian attacks on civilians by small drones carrying grenades and small mines, or simply crashing into their targets. Between July and October, 133 people were killed and over 1,300 people were injured this way. Regional Governor Alexander Prokudin sees this as consistent strategy of the Russian forces and called it targeted terrorism. Russian drones often attack ambulances, city buses and civilian cars. They're also covering the city and its surroundings in petrol mines, which explode when touched. They're banned under the international agreements, but Russia is not a signatory to them. Local residents, tormented by constant attacks, are forced to leave their homes. One woman decided to run away after she saw a drone hovering over a playground where her 8-year-old son was playing. More often, the story does not have a happy ending in Kherson for residents. Alexandra, another local who was evacuated from the region previously, was trying to get her father to move west, but before her plans were realized, her dad died in an explosion while on his way to get water. I've seen all of the videos, I watched them so you wouldn't have to, because you don't want to watch these videos. This is not war, this is hunting of the civilians with Russian drones. And it is how it sounds like. It's drone dropping grenades. You can see the what's below, you can see just a regular old man riding a bike or somebody walking their dog. The grenade falls, and you know the rest. I watched it all, I know it all, and now you know it's happening. My friends, the Russian fifth generation fighter jet, I wouldn't call it the fifth generation, it's barely fourth generation, but yeah, the Russian fifth generation stealth fighter jet Su-57 arrived in China for the air show, and we saw it landing, we saw it close, and this is the video. I'm no expert of fifth generation fighter jets or air power at all, but I know some things, some very plain things. First of all, this is it, and there are screw holes here. You can see the screws. Now please comment if you know anything about jet. Should a fifth generation fighter jet have open screws like that? They're not covered at all. You can just see them. You can see them everywhere actually. And they're not flush. Look at it close. Boom. You can see it's just painted over with white paint, just like that. It's like a United States landlord edition, you know, where they paint over everything. Cheap landlords, like the switches of the lights and electrical outlets, that just paint over everything. This is what it looks like. Did a United States landlord paint this fifth generation Su-57? Was it you? Look at that. That's not a fifth generation fighter jet. I mean, exactly this video, look. This is how the landlords in the US paint their switches. And that's what the fighter jet looks like. Am I missing something? I mean, I know many of you have been pilots or veterans. Please enlighten me in the comments. Now, my friends, I want to share you the analysis or thread about peace agreement. You already know how I feel about peace. I think peace with Russia, without destroying Russian military, is not peace, but a pause until next war, and the next war will be more deadly because Russians then learn and recuperate. I don't believe in peace without the destruction of Russian military. The peacemongers have failed. Escalation was not managed. Conflicts were not contained. People were not protected. Laws were not respected. But I hear victories unrealistic and not even worth fighting for. But I see things very differently, and here's why. The messy failure and total bankruptcy of our strategy is hard to watch. In desperation, some hallucinate that peace agreement would be achievable, effective, practical and sustainable. A magic wand to make bad things go away. Some hope a peace agreement would not only wash away our sins, but also make people forget that victory has always been possible. Sure, we could have won at any time, even now, but we choose to lose instead. Worse than that, we forced our choice on Ukraine. Now is the perfect time to remember the advice of Winston Churchill. And here is the truth which I also believe in. Golden words from the man himself. We must choose between war and dishonor. We are choosing dishonor and we will have war. There is no peace with Russia. There is never peace with Russia. There is only victory with destroyed Russian military and the dismantling of the Russian Empire. Without that, there will not be a peace. There will only be a pause with millions of possible dead civilians in the next 2-3 decades. That's what you're signing if you want to sign up for peace. Unfortunately, also, if you do want to sign up for peace, you just don't know Russian foreign history, aggression history and war history. There has never been peace. There have only been pauses in hostilities. And my friends, for those comments, maybe they are pro-Russian trolls, maybe they, whoever is commenting that, oh, Ukrainians are retreating on the battlefield, I just want to cover this so you know that I know this and I take it into account. But if you look at any military victory or loss, any military conflict, you cannot analyze the movements of the front lines only. You must analyze it, but in the context of economies behind the militaries, the reserves, everything. I'll just read you the thread so we're on the same page here. Bild analyst Julian Röpkan notes that Ukrainian armed forces are threatened by a cauldron in the Donetsk region. The Russians have come from the northeast to the shores of the Kurakivska reservoir in the Donetsk region. At the same time, the occupiers are advancing towards it from the direction of Vuhledar. According to the analyst, if the Ukrainian armed forces do not retreat, they face the threat of being caught in a cauldron around the town of Kurakove. I'll zoom in from the live UA battle map. I don't usually do frontline updates because there are other channels who do it so much better than me, but I just show it to you on this channel because I've getting some comments that people think I don't know what's happening on the front lines. I do. I watch it every day. And Ukrainians are retreating for the last 3 months, and Russians are advancing quite aggressively, especially in Kurakove actually, this settlement right here, and the reservoir right here in Donetsk. This Ukrainian contingent, yes, it's a very dangerous situation for them. They will probably pull out like they always have at the last moment, but they're taking heavy losses, and Russians are advancing very fast. Now, on the economic front, the things are quite the opposite. Russians' refineries, oil infrastructure and facilities are being attacked daily with Ukrainian drones. This hurts Russian economy a lot. Sanctions hurt it a lot. And the fact that Russia has to import North Korean artillery shells and manpower shows us the reserve situation that they know they have in the Russian military. Otherwise, they wouldn't import North Korean military. So, taking this into account, it is not rosy for the Russians, but it's really bad for the Ukrainians also. And I'm aware of the situation. That's all I wanted to say. Now, my friends, I want to watch a very interesting video. I haven't seen Russian FPV drones being intercepted this way before. We've seen Ukrainian FPVs ram into Russian Zala recon drones, other recon drones, fixed-wing recon drones. But in this case, we see a Russian FPV, and flying towards it is a Ukrainian drone. And it's something surprising I haven't seen before. Look at it. Boom! It shot a net. That's a Spider-Man. That's a Spider-Man drone. Pew! We went like that, and a Russian drone goes down. Nice. Possibly a very cheap way to bring them down again. Again, we see this innovation coming from the Ukrainians. Proud to see it. My friends, now for the Humpty edition of this week's Buy Me a Coffee monthly members butchering. I'll be butchering their names, and if you're new to this channel, this is the weirdest way to thank the supporters or monthly members, I know, but that's how I do it. With my Estonian pronunciation, I'll bring these names to the oblivion, to the horizon. And all of these guys actually wrote to me and Buy Me a Coffee. You can see the messages here. I wrote you back, so go and check it out. Karles Tovd Lebov, Keri Field, David Marsk, Paul Bokevikius, Ke Buttersnaps, Bov Tuch, Mokrator. Thank you. Each of these guys is a monthly member of Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description below. If you can allow it to yourself, go and sign up. Until my next update, my friends, which will be on Friday, so in 2 days. Be sure to be back. Until then, Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.